Well, hello and welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. I am delighted to be in this brand new setting that you probably don't recognize unless you've been to a place called Baja Mar. I'm sitting here in the Manor Bar at the Rosewood, which is a beautiful establishment. We are here because this weekend is the Baja Mar Culinary and Arts Festival. This is the third year. It's my first year being here, and I have to tell you, it's pretty spectacular. But this guy next to me, he's a seasoned vet in more ways than one. This is your third.
That means I'm old.
That does not mean you're old. We're old. But we're here to do a little wine thing at the festival here, which includes chefs and artists, and of course what we do on the drinking side of things. But more importantly, we're here to talk about wine with you guys today. With me is Ken Frederickson, master sommelier, and a man who wears many hats in the wine industry and spirits industry for that matter. So welcome.
I try. I hustle.
You hustle. We all kind of hustle.
We all do, actually. It's the only way to get ahead in this business.
I feel the same way. And you know what? You didn't have to because you've been a master sommelier for 20 plus years now.
Yes.
And you found your way through multiple different industries within the wine world. But where have you landed now?
So today I am based in Chicago, and I I have a wholesale wine and spirits distribution company, and it's also headquarters for two separate spirits import businesses. So one focusing on Japanese whiskey and the other focusing on Italian artigianale, small family-owned brands. So cool. Those imports come and go across the country, but in Chicago, we sell directly into restaurants and retailers.
So two of like the fastest growing segments of our...
Yeah.
Right? Japanese whiskey has been like on the up, and
and
Italian wine as well.
Italian as well. So with the Japanese thing, I was actually better lucky than good. We started importing.
You need to be both in this world, I'm convinced.
You do. You definitely. A little luck helps. So in 2010, we started importing Japanese whiskey, and we had a really hard time getting people to buy. Mm-hmm. People weren't quite ready at that point, but they were very close because by the time
what year was this?
2010.
Okay,
when we started, and then when we started, there was 13 distilleries in Japan. Today, there's about 105 licenses.
Wow. So
in that 10, 11 years, you've seen just an incredible growth. And we were at the right place at the right time. So we have some amazing partners, great families that have these distilleries in Japan. And we've been bringing in Japanese whiskey for 11, 12 years now. And it's been a great run. Italian spirits are new for us, but I think that is a segment because some of these big companies have pushed the envelope a little bit. Campari, Di Serrano, some of these, everybody knows what a spritz
Aperol.
is. Aperol. So this is happening now where these craft brands are coming behind it. It's very similar to the wine world. At one point in time in my career, there were just 4 conglomerates that wine companies in the U.S. that held about 70% of the sales. And
wow, that's a huge number.
Yeah, when you look at the wine company, Gallo, those companies, Constellation, those they really held it all, and they pushed out there, and they did a great job. And then behind it came all these artisans, and we saw, for me, being a sommelier at Spago and at Charlie Trotter and so forth, we were seeing brand new wines like Flowers, which has, grown and turned into a really nice brand and a big brand. Lots of wines I saw at the beginning and kind of see where their growth is. And I think today for me on the wine side of things, as a small distributor, something we do is we really try to manage the expectation of these producers. And it's great for us to know a producer that has a limit because we're only going to be...
In terms of scalability?
Correct. So we'd love to talk to a producer that says, we have a winery license for 10,000 cases, or we only want to be 3,000 cases or 5,000 cases. It's really hard conversation for us to have with a winery that comes and says, I want to be the next Josh, or I want to be the next Miomi.
Right.
Right. It's like, oh my God, we're not going to be able to hang on to that. So we know we're small, we know we're craft, artisan focused. We still follow the trends very carefully, but so that's what I'm doing today.
Busy. Great. Well, this is perfect because I really wanted to talk about sort of wine trends, have a little inside baseball conversation. The last episode that we talked about sort of dug into wine distributorship and just very briefly. We didn't get too in the weeds with it. But I think it gave people a glimpse into the behind-the-scenes side of our world, which is a very interesting one right now, because I'm sure you're seeing the headlines. I'm seeing the headlines of, what is shifting in the wine world.
Right.
And so much of the conversation is around, people are drinking less wine, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, and I don't know where you stand on this, it just seems like things have just shifted in terms of how people are drinking wine and why they're drinking wine. And so really what I want this conversation to be about today is, give people an inside look at what is going on behind the scenes, what you're seeing in Chicago, both on the spirit side, on the wine side. I love that you brought up the Italian spirits, because I think for me, that has been such a catalyst to bring more people into the wine world.
Yes.
Vis-a-vis spritzes and all the things around mixing wine and cocktails.
Vermouth. Huge. Wine-based, aromatic wine, essentially. And those are definitely entry into great wine as well, or the Italian culture.
Yeah.
We're still a country in the U.S. that imports more Italian wine than any other country.
So, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're the largest importer. The largest import category is Italian. Second is French. Now, the French were, in the last 5 years, they did eclipse Italy, but Italy's now back on top. So it's kind of neck and neck, but we drink more Italian wine than any other import category.
Yeah, well, and being a girl from Philadelphia, we love our Italian.
Oh, yeah. It indexes quite well there in Philadelphia.
I didn't realize until I moved back there, and my fiance pointed it out, and he was like, when we go to any restaurant, if you look at the list, the menu, it doesn't matter if it's sushi, it doesn't matter if it's steakhouse, there is always an Italian section on a Philadelphia menu. And I never noticed it, but he's absolutely right. Like, we really do love Italian culture.
Look, in Chicago, we're not far behind.
Yeah.
Further west you go, the more American it gets, the more, I think New York is maybe the exception. It's very international in New York for sure. So
definitely. Well, that's where I started and I'm going to pour you some wine. That's where I started my wine career, was in New York. And it was very international. And I always felt like it leaned very French heavy. And so I didn't get a huge look into Italian wines until much later in my career. And it really wasn't until I started visiting Italy that I started to understand the culture around Italian wine. And then I think just Italian wine as a category. And I think to me, that was such a big aha moment, and that you see the marriage between food and wine and culture there in a way that I don't think that we have fully embraced in the US. Except that we're starting to see it move in through these spritzes and through other things. So,
well, I hope on just something that's so important that you just said to me is that I hope we can find that, because the pleasures of the table are so important today.
So important.
To get kids to drop their iPad and people to drop their phones, and to start with an aperitivo, and to move on to a nice white wine, and then a red wine, and then maybe a digestivo, and have this sort of cultural interaction at the table is something that I really encourage, because the cultures are just different.
Yeah.
And I think we'll pick it up. People have to, and we are, but people have to really understand that there's just so much, like you just said, behind the entire culture of it. And that's part of what we want to push. And I think right now is a really good time to do it, because younger people have this. I just read an article, and I don't totally agree with it. It was written in 750 Daily. It was a good article. It was really kind of on the idea that the sommelier is dead, right? The word, the sommelier, and I guess the pretense and kind of like this like hoity-toityness kind of should be gone.
Sure.
But they moved into a place very quickly where it was like people working on the floor, working in wine on the floor, should be called like director of vibes and things like that. And that's a little too much for me, but I can see where they're going.
Yeah, I get it. It's very like millennial Gen Z of them, but yeah, I mean, totally. It is like, you were a somm on the floor, I was a somm on the floor. Like, you are kind of director of vibes. Like, that is like
you are
like, in the absence of a traditional like maitre d', like your job as a somm is to like really kind of curate the experience for the guest, and that I think filters out into the room. So I agree with that, but I also am like,
I think we're going to find
it's a little too much.
Yeah, I think we're going to find this middle ground, because it's like a pendulum, right? So when I was a sommelier coming up, working in Charlie Trotter, I would say being a sommelier was, one, very technical. I was studying for the master sommelier, so it was very technical, and two, really logical. And so the other end of this pendulum is really what this person was writing about, and that's this sort of illogical, very emotional. And you're right. It's Xers, Zs, and right behind that, when you turn the corner, it's going to be Gen Alpha, like my son, who's 8 years old and giving me words I have never heard before.
No cap.
So that's going to exactly. So that's going to happen, and we're going to have to kind of pay attention. But somewhere in the middle, we're gonna come back, and we're going to land somewhere in the middle, and it is going to be maybe not as defined as it was when I was a sommelier, but not quite as loose as I see happening now.
Yeah.
So we will find our way.
I find that I'm here. Let's here's a drink.
It smells so good.
We're talking about wine and weaving it into culture.
This is great.
Yeah, we're drinking Presq'uile, which I think is maybe a winery you're semi-familiar with. This is actually a winery that is relatively new to me, only within the last 2 years.
Look at me. I just picked up and I immediately went to the back of the bottle.
You did.
And that is like a complete that's the logical, technical habit.
Yeah.
Where a millennial or a Z, they would look at the front of the bottle and they want that emotional connection.
Yeah.
And someone like me who's an X, I'm going to look at the back.
Okay, so explain that to me. Why would you look at the back?
So I'm looking for, I guess on the front we could probably find alcohol level, but I'm looking for any sort of technical information. And you see a lot of wineries today that'll put what barrels they used, what's maybe even pH or acidity levels, things like that are technical, how many cases were produced, those kinds of things. So I'm kind of looking for that. And then I think today people are like, wow, that does look pretty cool.
Yeah.
It looks a little Japanese. It looks a little,
Well, they have the ocean on there.
Exactly.
I mean, it kind of exudes this sort of like freshness, maybe like coastal vibes.
It looks like a wood block print or something like this. So it's got a real nice artistic impression.
Yeah.
And
Well, we drink with our eyes first, right?
We do.
I mean, nobody wants to pick up a wine that has an ugly label. And in fact, I was actually just talking to, I don't know if you know Jonah and Sarah Beer. They own True North Imports. We had them on the podcast a few episodes ago.
Love Jonah.
Yes, they're the best.
Super good.
He was saying that one of the first things they look for is a good label because people truly drink with their eyes. And I do think that is indicative of not only the previous generations, but the future generations. And I think that future generations are going to look more at the back label. Do you feel like I don't want to call it a problem, but maybe have a slight problem in the industry in that we haven't traditionally offered enough information about the wines?
Yes, I think we offered the wrong information. What do you
mean by that?
So what's important for today, we need to explain for instance, what Demeter certified is or what sustainability really means. People look now for caloric input everywhere. I'm not going so far as to say that we need a nutrition label on wine, but to have some sort of certification that would say where people would understand that this wine doesn't use additives, it doesn't have, those kinds of things are going to be important. I think you're exactly right. And that information, people will ultimately, if they can engage in the front, they'll turn to the back and they'll find the information that's relevant to them to make a decision. And so our largest wine consuming generation is aging out. The boomers are aging out and they are slowing down on wine consumption. And then you have a couple generations where things are a little bit lost, but you still have a lot of people in control of wine marketing that are also aging out. Seasoned. And they're having a real hard time to move into, what's relevant.
Right.
So you see things like, I love Jordan Salcido's Ramona, right?
Yes.
That's not...
And so ahead of her time with that.
So ahead of her time. I barely know her, but I know exactly what she was doing and the audience she was talking to. And it's been fantastic, right? So there's needs to be a little bit less of that information that's not as relevant to today's consumer and a little bit more fun ways to say it. Look at the success of like a winery like 19 Crimes.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that there was going to be some sort of real virtual connection through the scanning of, data on a mobile device that really talked about things that were really not, what I would say aren't really super relevant to what's in the wine, but engaged so many people emotionally.
Yeah.
that wine went crazy.
Well, they also did something that I think is missing from the wine world, which is interacting with other markets and cultures. And I think in that we're not interacting with the music world. We're not interacting with the fashion world. We're not interacting enough with the food world. And I think 19 Crimes was a great example, both with Martha and with Snoop and the label, of just like getting out of our own little circle and into other areas that people might not have otherwise found us.
That's right.
And I think to your point earlier about, these more seasoned marketing executives, we have been blowing the whistle for a decade now, talking about how do we get this next generation interested in wine? And they keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And so when I read these headlines like, the wine sales are crashing, nobody's drinking wine, it was like, well,
listen,
we've kind of been talking, like, this is not new news. Like, we knew this is the trajectory. And we kind of got lucky, so to speak, in 2020 with wine sales increasing the way that they did. But now that we're in 2024 and things have, obviously consumption is down because we're not at home the way that we used to.
Right.
I think we do need to relook at how we're marketing things and who we're marketing to and why people are drinking wine. People are not drinking wine today for the same reasons that they were 20 years ago. Last night you mentioned to me that some of the bigger, we won't name names, some of the bigger Napa wines are seeing a little bit of a drop-off in on-premise, meaning restaurant consumption.
Yep.
And to me, I wonder if it's, is that a shift in how people are drinking wine? Because these wines are just not integrated in their lives in the way that maybe they used to be.
In 2020, we had the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic provided the industry, because everybody was drinking at home and you have what's called like IRI, scan data and things like that. Everybody was buying retail, all the generations. So all of a sudden, you had this opportunity to really see trend data in a holistic environment, which was retail. Nobody was going to restaurants.
Right.
So it all happened at retail. So you saw what young consumers were buying and what old consumers were still buying. So that was really helpful. Mm-hmm. And then as you come out of the pandemic, start to see that there are like Napa wineries, Sonoma wineries, whatever, even imports that need to become familiar quickly with their what we call route to market. They're selling from the winery into a distributor. The distributor sells into a restaurant or into a retailer. And they're following how this is working. And once, like, let's say a bottle of wine comes in and it's, $50 at the distributor level. Mm-hmm. Once it goes into a restaurant, we all know there's a pretty good markup there. And then once it goes into retail, there's usually, a more favorable markup, but you don't have the experience of dining out and dining with friends.
Nice glassware.
Exactly. Nice glassware, service, all of that. So understanding those two channels have become extremely critical to wineries for them to be successful. And once they get the data, they have to be ready to pivot. Yeah. Because we sell, as a wholesaler, we sell an incredible iconic set of California wines, some Napa icons for sure. And what we've seen is they've gone, they still want to go to restaurants, but when restaurants are charging a little bit more, taking price a little bit, they become much harder for people. There's only a limited number of people that can go out and buy a $2,000-$3,000 bottle of wine on a wine list.
Super limited.
Super limited. And so we're still in a value economy.
Right.
And there's no doubt about it. And whether the economy's strong. Yeah. Actually. But there is still a level of uncertainty, even for people. That's what people can't figure out. They're like, wait, the economy looks good, but everybody is still worried and complaining, and things aren't, everybody's still a little nervous. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Where do you see, going back to this idea of like restaurant on-premise consumption? So when we say on-premise, for those who are listening, on-premise means you're drinking the wine on the premises, meaning a restaurant or a wine bar or something equivalent. With wine prices being what they are, and we just talked about the economy a little bit.
Lists are shrinking too.
Lists are shrinking.
They're shrinking.
What is happening with on-premise? Do you think that we are gearing up for restaurants because also restaurants are struggling, right? In terms of how they're making money, they're getting more expensive. Do you think that we are positioning ourselves, or is the economy positioning itself to be in a place where we're going to see less of a markup on wines? Or do you think that's not even in the equation?
It's too early to tell. Mm-hmm. We have seen most recently this year, we have seen a couple restaurants open with the ideation that they want to be the most affordable or the most accessible. Mm-hmm. We have a really cool Italian restaurant in Logan Square in Chicago, which is kind of this hipster area that opened with Cortinos. So everything on their list is served in Cortinos,
which are, just explain.
So those are quarter liters.
Okay.
So a quarter of a liter, and it makes it really accessible. So like, let's just say the bottle was $40, you can get a Cortino for $10, and so you get this access. And you get people are drinking a little less, and they're trying to be really friendly and really accessible.
Yeah.
And so I think they're ahead of the curve. I think that people are going to have to, if they want to stay relevant, the idea of buying a bottle of wine for $20 and charging $100 is going to continue to be challenged because people just don't feel well or feel like that's, favorable. Everything's on that phone.
We can see it.
We can see it.
And everybody does. They go to Vivino and they 100%. Check to see.
So I work the floor every once in a while with, I've worked with the Alinea Group. I've worked with, whoever it is and to go out because I like it.
Yeah.
And it gives me more information. And you can't go a night without somebody like double checking, like, really? Is that true?
I even find myself doing it when I go to places that I'm like, I really don't know any of these wines, but I'm just going to start Googling. And when I see that the markup is egregious, I'm immediately like,
that's
maybe
tough.
not. It is tough. But I do think you're right. I think restaurants and sommeliers are going to get more creative in how they're selling wine, meaning like maybe it's not just going to be by the bottle, by the glass. There's going to be these alternative ways
absolutely
to format it.
I 100%. So like, if you look at the psychology behind like a Costco buyer and a Costco seller, like Costco as a group, they love like, they don't get like LaCroix in a 12 pack because it's everywhere.
Right.
They sell LaCroix in a 15 pack because you can't do the math. You're like, okay,
right. You're disarmed. You're disarmed.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
So being able to offer this, like, and this is really this is the inside baseball, right? So in your environment, what is the opportunity to adjust your route to market? How are you engaging with that final consumer? As a distributor, we're playing the same game. So you're the sommelier, you're my buyer. I'm coming out to talk to you. You're seeing packages and different ideas from me as a distributor that are completely, okay, I'll give you a good example. So we're doing the math and saying, okay, buy 5 bottles of Pintia, which is in the Vega Sicilia family. Buy 5 bottles of Pintia and get 1 free. We're just working the math a little bit different. This culture is we're a value economy. We're a discount culture. We want a free good. We want a, different.
I'm a Costco shopper.
Exactly.
I look for the .97, even like at Costco, for sure.
Right. So restaurants need to be, in my opinion, they need to be more creative when they're going in and offering these kinds of things. Maybe Icon California Cabernets in 3-ounce pours, where people can achieve a $30, $40 pour of wine, and they get to try something that they wouldn't get to try otherwise. And you have Coravon and things like that really help.
Well, I was just going to say, in the advent of wine preservation and where we've landed in the last 10 years, it's not unreasonable to do things like that now. It used to be 15, 20 years ago, but now, you've got so many different avenues to keep these great wines fresh and safe. And to me, it seems obvious that if I were a wine buyer and a sommelier at a restaurant now, that is definitely where I'd be looking because I'm having a hard time going out on a Tuesday night and buying a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And then I look at the buy the glass options and I'm uninspired. And I think a lot of people find that to be the case. And so I think that is where some of these wine cocktails and cocktails in general are starting to find a home. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I don't see it as much in the U.S. I travel quite a bit in Japan. There is a group called the SG Group, famous mixologist Shingo Goken. He has a restaurant that does only wine-based cocktails. That's it.
That's cool.
So it's wine-based cocktails in every way you could possibly imagine.
Well,
it's super awesome.
In New York, Patrick Cappiello, what was the restaurant that was all the same thing, right?
Oh, really? I can't remember.
Way back, the restaurant has since closed, but it was the same. They only had a wine license, and so they were doing, you just reminded me, wine-based cocktails. Yeah.
Great. So way ahead of his time.
Yes.
I think people, when they go out, younger people today, that's what's kind of moving people into the on-premise in the restaurant into cocktails, right? So because they're looking for, hey, I can have this $14, $15 cocktail, or we can, split a bottle of wine. And most of the time on wine list, it's hard to find anything for under $30, $40, $50. So that's that value proposition.
I want to shift gears a little bit into these Italian spirits.
Okay.
I'm so curious, why, how, explain, because the only ones I really know are like Campari, Di Serono, as you mentioned, Aperol.
Right.
That's maybe it.
Well,
or like the big ones.
One little thing to say about like our willingness in the wine business, just to close the loop, I have to say this. We have to think innovation beyond like a screw cap, right? We just have to think that way. Everybody's like, oh, I'm so innovative, like a screw cap. I'm like, okay, stop.
Great.
Like we have to think other packages, and I think that's what your point was, is like, let's get that wine industry to be a little bit more, innovative as it comes to market.
And accepting,
we're
right?
Accepting.
Some people are doing it, and they're just, the world is just like, hey, we're still not sure. We don't know.
Right. Have you ever used Gaza olive oil? It's the squeeze bottle.
Yeah, the squeeze bottle. I love that.
Okay, like that's putting an industry on its head, right?
They just showed up at Costco the other day.
Totally. So it's so simple.
Yep.
So I have about 100 ideas where the wine business could just be like, just get out of your mold and go and be innovative. And you're going to talk to a different audience. Okay, artigianale spirits of Italy. So this has been a project I've been working on for 4 years. Mm-hmm. I recruited, and he's a great partner, a business partner, and a super sharp guy, David Lynch, who wrote Vino Italiano. He speaks the language. He's traveled all over Italy. He's just a really wonderful guy, and he believes in spirits as much as I do. And so the idea is for us to really connect with families that have these, because it's part of their culture.
Yeah.
They've been making these. We have multi-generation families. We have a producer in Emilia-Romagna that's over 200 years old.
Gosh.
And they've been making the same bitter, and they have this balsamic vermouth. They're in Emilia-Romagna. They have balsamic. It's a recipe from 1905. So they're using true Acetaia balsamico with a Lambrusco wine base for their vermouth. It is out of control. It is so delicious. But these small craft brands, that brand's called Cassoni, these will start to have a voice because people know, they know vermouth, they know Martini and Rossi, they know these big brands.
Yeah.
So coming right behind that is this sort of revolution. And, look, it's not too creative, but the name of our company is the Italian Spirits Company. And it's
let the producers be creative.
Let the producers. So
help people walk through the door.
And I bring it up because the conversations we're having with these small producers are, the opportunity comes in giving people today the knowledge, how you're producing, organic, sustainability, your craft, right? And we'll tell the story. As the importer, we'll tell the story. So if you go on our website, we're full of technical data, which really helps geeks. And we're full of like really fun data as well. Like where did vermouth come from? Where did aperitivi, how did that all start? So we have this Italian spirits primer that's just pages of like history and where this came from and why it's part of the culture. So we're extremely excited about it. And so people think Tuscan gin is a new thing.
Tuscan gin.
So juniper is incredible in Tuscany.
Right.
It grows wild.
It's
native. Yeah. It's like the only other place that has as much juniper of quality is Macedonia. But if you're in Tuscany, you can't really walk a hillside without finding
you
juniper.
Smell it everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a producer called Ginapraio, which is over 10 years old. They've had their 10-year anniversary. They aged their Navy strength in amphora. The family makes amphora from a particular clay from Tuscany. So they're making this true sort of indigenous. They do their Navy strength in amphora. They have a gin it's a Mediterranean gin, where the juniper is only sourced from Mediterranean. All the botanicals and juniper is sourced from the Mediterranean, like think of the Maremma.
Yeah.
And then you have, the Tiber River Valley, which is a different type of juniper. So these people are really geeking out on the botanicals that are going in their gin.
Yeah.
Ginapraio gin is the best gin. It is so delicious. And those are the stories that need to be told.
Yeah. It's so interesting as you're talking. I'm like, these worlds are so connected between wine and spirits. And if we're talking about trends, it just feels to me that this is 1000% this intersection that's about to happen in like the biggest way. I was just at Charleston Food and Wine, and I was there featuring the Massican Anya, which I'm sure Dan Petrosky's wine you're familiar with. And before I went there, I was making a gin martini. I posted on Instagram, and Dan messaged me and he said, you can sub out your vermouth for the Massican Anya. And I was like, What do you mean? And he was like, sub it out. It's less sugar. It's lower alcohol. But he was like, you're going to get viscosity and you're going to get all of those like floral aromatics that you would normally get from vermouth. And I was like, this is genius. And so at Charleston Food and Wine, we did a little demo of it and people's minds were blown. And I think to me, it was like, it's so silly, but it was like that aha moment of these worlds can just live together. And I think as we're thinking about how people are starting to drink now, they will just continue to be getting more integrated. And so you bringing in spirits like this just really helps for that third wave to come on board.
100%. You're at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I see where it's going. So this last week I was a guest with Vin Italy USA, and I gave a couple lectures. I had the opportunity to talk with the Minister of Agriculture. They brought some, diplomatic people from Italy over to like shake hands and kiss babies. And when I had my opportunity to talk with the Minister of Agriculture, I said, listen, there was only 2 or 3 spirits producers, or maybe 4 at the whole Vin Italy. It was all wine. And I represent a couple of those spirits producers. We'll talk about one of them in a second. But I told him, I said, listen, believe me, there is terroir in spirits. And so when you talk about like how these intersections, how this is going to come together, the interest in spirits and like you said, how you mix a cocktail and how you create complexity and flavor and so forth, how fun is it? Because no offense to wine, because I love wine, but when you open it, you get what you get.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you can decant it.
Right. But most wines are not going to change to an effect that will be noticeable.
Through a bottle of gin, you can make 10 different cocktails and find your happy place.
Yeah.
How you use it. So and I think today that's what people across any consumer product good.
They want versatility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's, this conversation's been so helpful, even just for me, because I look at all of our worlds. And I think for a long time, wine was like really trying to find its way with food. And we've had some success, but not in a way that I would like to see. And I think the wine and the spirits world should be so much more married than they already are. Do you have it with you?
This is shameless. I actually did. I actually brought it for you but now that I know how excited you are, I was going to, after this podcast is over, you and I are going to sit down and we're going to have
I love the bottle.
Have a martini. But so the Mediterranean's done in like a blue bottle to invoke the
beautiful
Mediterranean Sea. And then you have a regular clear glass bottle in the dry, and then a different color label, like a black colored label for the Navy strength. But this is an incredible family. You can just see how it's coming to market. The packaging is quite nice. It's it's its own mold.
It's beautiful.
So that's Gin Apraio, one of the Italian spirits company's gins. If given the opportunity, I'll come to you. I'll come to Philadelphia and I'll do a whole tasting for you.
Well, I love it. It's like Chianti Amarena, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So cool.
Yeah, so these are gonna overlap in the wine world for sure. I mean, we're bringing products in from Abruzzo and Emilia-Romagna and Trento and Piedmont, tons of stuff from Piedmont. So these are all languages that I think sommeliers are going to love.
I love it. I think, for as much as we've heard in the headlines about the doom and gloom of the wine world, I think there's just so much excitement ahead. And I think the way that we're positioning right now is just opening up avenues. I think we're closing doors to open really, really big ones. It's interesting. I was drinking this wine, and I was swirling, I was tasting it, and I felt the acidity just race down. And I was like, can you, okay, so this is a $20 to $30 bottle of wine, fairly, accessible. Presq'uile makes, really beautiful single vineyard Pinots and Chards. They make really fun, carbonic Gamay. But then they make these Santa Barbara appellated wines that are, like I said, affordable and accessible. And I was thinking back, even 15, 20 years, it's so refreshing to see a wine made in this style that is high quality, but that's also something that we would love to enjoy with food, right? This is can you imagine 25 years ago drinking a $25 bottle of Chardonnay and it tasting like this? It didn't exist.
Didn't exist. You're absolutely right. This wine has so much acidity. It's really delicious, and it's something that should be part part of the pleasures of the table, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's
I'm
fresh
sorry
enough.
I brought no food for us. That's on me.
It's okay.
It's on me.
Well, mine's almost gone, so apparently it's working. No, but it's fresh enough. It's it's got this litheness to it, this brightness and liftedness that it's fine to drink on its own. I do know a little bit about this winery and this family, and they're extremely passionate, and they invest in making great wine, and that's what it takes.
Yeah.
So this is, in my opinion, this is right up the fairway. This is I don't play golf, but that's like people know that analogy. It's delicious. It's super well made. So if you go a little left, you get a little more, natty, a little, there's this big natural wine movement. And if you go a little bit to the right, you're getting this more power, more oak, more alcohol, and there's that movement too. And we've seen both. And so, like you said, to find something that's extremely well made, this wine's going to make a lot of friends. I'm sure. I don't know how long they've been making it, but these guys do it right. They have this kind of old world sensibility.
Yeah.
I think they have a I think Jeremy Sess may have been a consultant at one point.
He is or was.
He
definitely was. I think he still is.
Yeah.
And they're also food obsessed.
They're food obsessed. So there's old world sensibility, but this speaks Santa Barbara because there is bright fruit. It's got a lot of texture. Smells to me a little bit like on the nose. It smells a little like Dijon clone Chardonnay to me, grown in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
It has a little bit of that, just a light tick of like this canned corn character that I get right in the nose. I love this wine.
Yeah.
And I'm really able to sit down and hang with this wine. I need to revisit these wines. I need to put a couple more. I have some older vintages in my cellar, but this is light years ahead of where it was.
They're great. I went down maybe 2 years ago and visited them, and it was like less than that. I think it was a year ago. And I had the best time. They were doing this like tri-tip cook-off, and everyone was there. Every person in their membership within a 50-mile radius was there. But the day before, we had done the full winery experience, and they had told us ahead of time, like, hey, we'll do some snacks for you. It's a mezze board. And I was like, all right. I mean, we've all been to those wineries, right? Like, great, some olives, some charcuterie, call it a day. This mezze board was outrageous. It was the most beautiful, delicious, well-crafted mezze board of the most wine-friendly snacks that I've ever had. And it was all pulled from this garden that their chef insisted on planting. I believe she's French. She got there and she was like, we're in California. There is absolutely no reason I should be grocery shopping. It should all be right here. And so basically everything that was on that board was grown on property, and it was geared to go with the wine, and the wine is geared to go with the food. And to me, this is a winery that speaks to the future of the wine industry and how they're making wine, their approach to why they're making wine. I think there is not enough of why are we doing this, and for whom are we doing this?
I've had the same experience. They are a winery that is investing in that experience, that cultural experience, and they have a chef, right? So maybe not every winery has a chef, but they have a chef with purpose, as you're saying. So they're looking at it and they're doing the best that they can to put food with their wine. Yeah. And I think they're from like New Orleans or something. So you don't find, like, if you find it, most people in New Orleans love food, right? It's a food culture. Yeah. It's a food, family,
and
drinking culture. Absolutely. It's a great culture.
No, I loved it. I'm so happy that we got to include them. And I know this format of the show has been a little bit different for those of you listening, but this is the wine from the podcast Wine Club shipment. It's the last one of this series. Wow. So for those of you who are drinking this at home, I hope that you grab a snack with this. At the very least, like, go run and grab some hummus from your like grocery store and some pita or some vegetables or whatever you got. I mean, it's the fall, so like honestly, anything kind of goes. But delighted to be drinking this. We are about to head into a very fun weekend.
We are.
This is like just getting started. I went to the water park yesterday and did like some of the surfing and the water slides. This is the best place to enjoy wine and food, and I love that they're doing this at this gorgeous resort. I love that they're doing this in the Caribbean. It's bringing chefs from all over. It's bringing wine people from all over. Yeah. What do you think I have to look forward to this weekend?
Well, this is an incredible weekend. So you have Daniel Boulud, Marcus Samuelsson, Carla Hall, Scott Conant. You have this just like long list of celebrity chefs that are down here.
King of Tuscany, Dario Cecchini.
Dario Cecchini. is here. The best hamburger I've ever had is roadside, right outside of Penzano. He has this little roadside cart that he puts.
I didn't know that.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I've only been to the butcher thing.
It's incredible.
Man.
He's just a wonderful human. He's so fun to hang out with. So Dario Cecchini's here. A lot of wine tonight. Rod Stewart. Now I don't know if you know Rod Stewart, so I wasn't sure how much Rod Stewart I knew. So this morning in the gym on the treadmill, I said I'm going to do Rod Stewart Essentials, and I was like, oh my God, I know that song. Oh my God, I know that song. So
he's had a lot of hits.
He's had a lot of hits. He's a sexy dude, you know. I mean, come on, he lived a pretty interesting life. And so tonight we'll see him outside. And it's just going to be a great weekend. Baja Mar is one of the best places to get away. Yeah, I think it's easy to Nassau. It's an easy trip. Yeah, super fun.
This has been a very surprising trip for me because when people explain Baja Mar, they're like, oh, it's 3 resorts in one. It's in Nassau. And I'm like, that sounds cool. And we started walking through, and I'm like, this is Vegas in the Caribbean. Like, it's the best Vegas resort in the Caribbean. You look out, the ocean is beautiful. It's, crystal clear and blue. And then you've got all of the amenities at your fingertips. It's really nice. And the best chefs. I'm really looking forward to it. I get to host a dinner with Dario Cecchini tomorrow night.
Oh, amazing.
With some wine, and then host a brunch with Carla Hall and Amanda Freitag. And you got some seminars tomorrow.
Got a couple seminars. I'm doing one seminar called Who Ordered It Best, where the guests are going to get to choose like the price point of the wine, and there's some little tricky wine. It's blind. And then I have a seminar called Extreme Vineyards, where we're going to cover off on some of the craziest places to grow and produce wine around the world. So I'm excited about it. It's a wonderful audience. I mean, people that are here they've kind of like loosened the tie a bit.
I hope so.
They're ready to have a good time. They're ready to drink a glass of wine or have a cocktail, and so that makes a pretty easy environment.
I mean, if I can go down a water slide, which I haven't done in easily 2 decades, like, I think everyone should be encouraged to loosen their tie and have a great time.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
This has been a great way to get a little inside scoop on what's going on in the wine world. Delicious. Pleasure. I'm so looking forward to this. You guys, if you love this, please subscribe, do all the things, and if you are not a member of the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club, you can find everything you need to subscribe below. I will see you guys for the next episode with a brand new set of wines in just a few weeks. Cheers.